Casio is killing off what I think is one of their best features in their digital watches, which is the electroluminescent backlight. At least that's what seems to be going on. I don't have any official word from Casio, but if you look at internet forums or if you look at Casio's own release schedule over the past year or two and see which watches they are releasing and which ones they are discontinuing, it becomes very clear that Casio is favoring LED backlights over electroluminescent backlights. And for me, that's unfortunate because EL backlights are one of my favorite kinds of features on a watch. Obviously, there are some drawbacks to them, which is why Casio is moving away. In this video, I'll talk about why that is, whether or not I think this is the right move on Casio's part, and if you are interested in getting a watch that does still have an EL backlight, we'll go over the ones that are still available in Casio's catalog in case you want to pick one up before they are gone forever. Take a quick look and then we'll get into it. Hey guys, this is Dave. Welcome back to Just the Watch, a channel all about affordable watches. As always, I am recording this from my home in Iwate, Japan, and today we're talking about Casio's backlight technology. This might be kind of a nerdy topic, but it's something that I found really interesting because I was really surprised when I found out that Casio seemed to be abandoning the electroluminescent backlight because for me, I thought that was the superior backlight technology. Turns out it's a little bit more complicated than that. Let's jump right into this by talking about these two ways that Casio uses to illuminate their digital watches, either by using electroluminescence or an LED. So Casio employs two main types of illumination on their digital watches, and that would be either LED or electroluminescence. To my knowledge, the LED is the older technology of the two, and on some of the older Casio models, particularly F91W, the LED lights employed were pretty bad. You can still buy a brand new F91W today, and the green LED backlight that you're going to find inside basically doesn't work. It barely illuminates half of the display, making it very difficult to read in the dark, especially compared with other watches that Casio produces. Thankfully, Casio has gotten a lot better at using LEDs to light up their watches, and almost any new watch you're going to get from Casio is going to have a pretty decent LED light in it that will allow you to read the watch easily in the dark, although there are still some exceptions to that. Sometime around the 90s, Casio introduced the electroluminescent backlight, which, while costing slightly more to produce than an LED light, is, in my opinion, superior to LEDs both in terms of legibility in the dark and in the aesthetic look of it. An LED is basically a single point of light, and so it's going to illuminate some areas of the dial more than others. An electroluminescent backlight, or EL backlight, by contrast, employs a film that illuminates the entire digital portion of the watch evenly and beautifully. They have this really pleasing, cool blue-green glow to them. The level of brightness is perfect and even across the entire face of the dial. And because of this, the EL backlight became Casio's more premium option in their digital watches, particularly in their G-Shock line. Up until a couple of years ago, this was by far the most common type of lighting you would find on Casio's digital G-Shock watches. But that's changing now. While the electroluminescent backlights have more or less stayed the same in terms of cost and technology, Casio has been experimenting and improving their LED range of backlights and have recently been favoring a very cool looking white colored LED backlight that is extremely bright. And so in the last couple of years, we haven't really seen Casio release any new watches that feature an EL backlight. Instead, they're all coming with LEDs. And even some models that used to have an EL backlight have been updated to now include an LED backlight instead. Probably the most noticeable example of this is the G-Shock DW5600, which is one of the most popular and best-selling G-Shocks on the market. And Casio has dozens of versions of the DW5600 in production right now in all different colors and styles. And it's in this sort of transition period where they're still currently producing some models that have EL backlights and some that have LED backlights. For instance, you can still pick up the classic DW5600E version, which comes with the EL backlight, but I recently picked up Casio's brand new DW5600RL version. This is one of the G-Shocks that Casio released to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the original G-Shock Square. It utilizes the color scheme of the original G-Shock Square, and so it has a little bit more of a retro feel to it. But rather than simply changing the colors around, they also released it with this new module that has an LED backlight instead of an electroluminescent backlight. And when you look at the two backlights side by side, I still prefer the EL backlight. The LED backlight is good. It's very bright. It's very legible. There's not really any problem with it, but the lighting on the EL backlight is more evenly applied. I think it's a better overall brightness. It's just easier to read, and I think it looks better. So why is it that Casio is abandoning the EL backlight in favor of LEDs? First off, a caveat. To my knowledge, I'm not aware of Casio releasing any official position on this, so this is a little bit of conjecture based on Casio's recent releases, but it is a trend that has been picked up on and long commented on by a lot of other Casio fan sites and channels, so I'm a little bit late to the party here. There's a channel on YouTube called Wrist Action that covers a lot of Casio watches, and I watched a lot of their videos when I was researching this, so definitely go check them out as well if you want to find more information about Casio watches. So with that out of the way, I think there are three main reasons why Casio is moving towards LED backlights instead of EL backlights. The first is that LEDs consume less power than electroluminescent backlights, which means that you should be able to get longer battery life out of a watch with an LED backlight than an EL backlight. And in fact, if you look at the battery life estimates that Casio gives out on their site for the DW5600, comparing the versions with EL backlight versus LED backlights, you definitely see this bearing out. Casio rates the DW5600 models with an EL backlight to have a 2-year battery life, whereas the LED models are said to have an estimated 5-year battery life. And that in itself is a pretty strong reason to favor an LED backlight over an EL backlight. Now, it's possible that Casio has done some other things within the module to make it more energy efficient, and that's why we're seeing the newer ones with LED backlights having that much better of a battery performance. But they do seem to be maintaining that a large part of that is coming from the switch to LED versus electroluminescent. The second reason Casio seems to be choosing LEDs over EL backlights is that LEDs have a longer lifespan overall. So both LEDs and electroluminescent backlights are eventually going to fail on a watch. They don't last forever. The electroluminescent film in the module will eventually degrade and begin to get dimmer and more patchy, and eventually will stop working altogether. Likewise, an LED will also eventually wear out. But LEDs are said to have a much longer lifespan than electroluminescent backlights. I don't have any exact numbers on how long one lasts versus the other, but from the information I've gathered, it seems like we're talking about multiple years of difference in the lifespan between these two lighting technologies. So another very strong reason for favoring LED lights over electroluminescence. The third and final reason is that LED lights are cheaper and easier to implement than electroluminescent backlights. EL backlights require a certain kind of power to be provided to them, making it a little bit more complicated and expensive to produce modules that feature them. And this means that Casio can save some money by using LED backlights instead of EL backlights. This last one is good news for Casio, I guess, but it doesn't really help us that much, especially seeing as how Casio has been able to give us EL backlights on some of their cheapest watches in their entire catalog. The F105 and the A168 can both be picked up pretty easily for pretty close to the same price as an F91W. We're talking like around $20 here. And the DW5600E has long been considered the base model, the cheapest G-Shock model that you can get, and it still is despite the fact that it has an EL backlight. But taking those three reasons into consideration, I can definitely see that there's a strong argument to be made to favor LED backlights over EL backlights, especially when we're talking about the gains in terms of battery life and the longevity of the module itself. If you're hoping to keep your Casio watch for more than 10 years, an LED light probably is the better option. But in terms of performance and actual use, I still prefer EL backlights to LED. They're just a lot more consistent, and even on a lot of Casio's current models, you can still find some pretty bad examples of LED light implementation. For instance, I recently picked up a pretty newly released Casio G-Shock GA110. And the GA110 is a great anti-digi watch, giving you a lot of information in its digital displays, but it features a single dim LED light that doesn't illuminate the digital displays at all, and doesn't even illuminate the analog hands well enough to easily read them in the dark. And even the best LED backlights from Casio still have some problems. Because the light source tends to come from one direction, that means you're going to have one side being brighter than the other. And sometimes the LEDs used in these are actually so bright that it makes it a little bit difficult to read in the dark because they're kind of blinding. It's sort of cool to have a light that bright, but that's not always what you actually want in the dark. Whereas I think EL backlights really hit that sweet spot in terms of perfect, even brightness that makes it actually legible and functional in the dark. And so because of that, I'm a little bit bummed to see that Casio is moving away from that EL technology. And it kind of feels like only a matter of time before Casio stops producing EL backlights altogether. For instance, when Casio came out with the A1000, which could be looked at as sort of a full metal premium version of the A168 or some of their other retro watches, they went with that bright white LED instead of an electroluminescent backlight. Likewise, the newly released ABL 100WE, which looks even more like a spiritual successor to the A168, also dumped the A168's EL backlight in favor of an LED. All that said, Casio does still have quite a few watches in production that feature EL backlights, many of which can be picked up for a very affordable price. I've been talking a lot about the Casio A168, which is one of Casio's most iconic and affordable watches that's still easily available and in production. Another highly affordable one is the F105, which is essentially an F91W with an EL backlight instead of the horrendous green LED backlight that's featured on the F91W. And for that reason alone, I would highly recommend anybody interested in an F91W to get an F105 instead. And as mentioned before, there are still quite a few G-Shock watches that feature EL backlights, including a large number in the DW5600 line. If you look at the base models for the DW5600, they have a DW5600E and a DW5600U. They look pretty much identical, but the E version has the electroluminescent backlight and the U version has the LED backlight. And if you're interested in a particular G-Shock and have a preference for an EL backlight or an LED backlight, you can always look up the model number on Casio's website, drop down to the watch information there, and Casio is really good about telling you which backlight technology the watch has. And finally, if you're interested in hunting down EL backlights before they're gone, I went ahead and curated a bunch of them for my Amazon store, so I'll leave a link to that down below in the description for anybody who wants to check that out. All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up for today. Drop me a comment down below. Let me know which of these two backlight technologies you are in favor of, what you think of Casio moving away from the EL backlight. Is this a good business move? Is the LED backlight actually superior, or are you like me and you prefer the electroluminescent backlight? If you're interested in purchasing these watches, I have some Amazon affiliate links down below. Help me out by using those. Or you can go to my website at justthewatch.com and pick up a cool t-shirt like this one. That'll wrap it up for today. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys later. Bye.